Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Samantha Gordon. I am from the Office of Development and Alumni Relations here at PACE. And momentarily, I will turn the program over to our moderator, Professor Shirley Acevedo Buontempo. But before I do that, I just want to chat with you all a little bit about our program tonight. So as you all know, this program is called Time to Roar, Discover New Careers, Lifestyles, and More at Midlife. It's a very exciting program. So just a few things before we start. If you can, during the presentation part, if you'll keep yourself on mute, just so we can drown out any background noise, that'll be great. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. During that question and answer portion, I can read them out in the chat box, or if you feel comfortable, I invite you to, show yourself on video, unmute yourself, and really make this an interactive experience. So with that, I will turn it over to Professor Tariq. So Professor Tariq is the chair of the Department of Management and Management Science, and he's a professor here in the Lubin School of Business. He's a professor of human resources and talent. He earned his PhD in industrial relations and HR management from Rutgers. And right now, his research interests are on international human resource management with a focus on issues related to talent management. So he is very well versed in this field. So Professor Tariq, please take it away.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone. But first, I would like to thank our panelists who making the time to come and talk to us. And these are extremely important discussions for the PACE community and especially Lubin. And this topic is extremely timely. I mean, recently you must have seen these consulting firms come up with studies after studies that highlight the shortage of talent. And at the same time, we have this the pool of talent, 70 million baby boomers, and that a lot of time are ignored. So this is a great topic, a timely topic, where I think we'll all learn in the next hour or so. So what I'll do is I would like to ask each of the panelists to introduce himself or herself. So I would like to start with Neil. If you could please give us an introduction. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Neil Braun. I hope I'm at midlife. I'm at 60. I'm going to be 69 soon. So we'll see if this is midlife. I have my doubts. But I've been, I was trained as a lawyer, but I only practiced for a short period of time. I went to a client, became a film financing expert, brought that to HBO, had a 30-year career in the entertainment and media business. Finally, was president of the NBC television network and CEO of Viacom Entertainment. And I was in the movie business as well with Ron Howard and Brian Grazer. I was an internet entrepreneur in the late 90s. I was a recovering internet entrepreneur in the early 2000s. I was an environmental entrepreneur, and then I became dean of the Lubin School of Business for 10 years at 57. And I will tell you that of all the things I've ever done, it was the thing that felt most authentic to who I am. But I could only have done it the way I did it, having done everything else. I left last year, but I'm not retired. I have a video streaming startup in healthcare that I'm working on right now. It's a pleasure to be with everybody.
Thank you, Neil. Shirley. Your microphone is off, yes.
There we are. Yes, hi. Hi, thank you very much for hosting this evening on this very inspiring topic. It's my pleasure to be here. As a double PACE alum, I'm really proud of my affiliation with PACE and honored to share my story. I'm a first-gen Latina college graduate, and I attended Pace University and graduated in 1984 with a degree in business and marketing. My first career path was in Hispanic marketing and advertising, where I worked with divisions of Saatchi and Gray and packaged goods companies like Best Foods and Block Drug in advertising and brand marketing efforts. I loved that work because it allowed me to combine both my cultural background, my bilingual skills, my academic preparation in an industry that was rapidly growing as we were recognizing the growth of the Hispanic demographic market throughout the United States. I say I visited East Coast, West Coast, Southeast, Central, over and over again throughout my career and loved it. But then in 2001, I began to explore other options and I began to work in the nonprofit industries, particularly motivated by a desire to help my community. In launching my first position in a nonprofit, I found my life's vocation and something that I felt gave great meaning to my life. I returned to Pace University 26 years after graduating from my undergrad to pursue an MPA in nonprofit management. It was a lifelong goal that I kept postponing for multiple reasons. And I was thrilled to finally obtain that master's 5 months before my daughter graduated from high school. My capstone in the graduate program was on educational inequity and the challenges faced by low-income Hispanic youth. And this was the inspiration for the formation of a nonprofit organization that I launched at the age of 50 in 2012. Latino Youth College Access is an organization that makes college dreams a reality for first-gen low-income Latinx youth throughout Westchester County high Hispanic school districts. And our mission is to empower first-generation students on their journeys to and through college as they navigate higher education. It is certainly my life's purpose, my life's goal, and I've had some recent transitions, and I'm looking forward to what I'm going to do in the next decade.
Thank you. Michael.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone. I'm probably a bit of an anomaly because I just wrapped up a 42-year career in the magazine publishing industry. So I started out in my most significant role as the publisher of GQ magazine, where I spent 7 years, and then I became a senior VP and exec VP, and I most recently was the president and publishing director of Hearst Magazines and had the pleasure of launching Oprah Winfrey's magazine 20 years ago, as well as Food Network magazine, HGTV, we have Elle, we have Esquire, and many other. We have about 25 magazines and, of course, websites and social media, et cetera. But it was a very fun and very long and successful career. So I went and did an MBA at Pace University at night. I also have the distinct honor of having given the commencement speech and have an honorary doctorate from Pace. And I'm also a student in that 3 months ago, I graduated with a master's degree in nonprofit management and philanthropy from Columbia University. So I believe in lifelong learning, obviously, as I was in my 60s taking exams and writing papers. And so I can relate to all of you who are on the call and what that means, sweating out a grade still. I'm very passionate about the nonprofit sector. I've launched a foundation called Circle of Generosity. I'm on multiple nonprofit boards. I'm on the board of trustees of Pace University, as well as other organizations. And one of my moments of happiness is this week, I launched a book called Roar into the Second Half of Your Life, which is all about the topic that we're going to talk about tonight. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. So great introduction. I think it's fascinating, your background, your just rich experiences. So I'm going to start with Neil Braun with the first question. Neil, we're talking about second careers. It seems like you've had 14 careers and so far, and extremely successful. But during this time, did you experience failure, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced failure at many different levels. I mean, I think everybody who's successful knows that in order to achieve things, you've got to try things. And if you try things, sometimes you're going to fail. My biggest failure, or the time that was the most difficult for me, was I became an internet entrepreneur, as I alluded to. I left NBC to be an internet entrepreneur in 1999, when it seemed like the whole world was moving towards that, and I wanted to be part of it. I was figuring it out. I was learning on the job, basically. I tried 2 different startups, so I'm using my expertise in media and background. And but in 2000, the so-called bubble burst in internet financings, and we still hadn't reached profitability, and we still hadn't really even evolved a really solid business model. So those companies folded, and I found myself in my 50s with young children in private school and still college to pay for, and a lifestyle overhead that I had been building over time because of earlier successes. It was probably the most afraid I ever was, and it took me 15 months to get back on track. It really was a difficult time for me. I mean, the only reason I was able to get out of bed every day was my wife, who's a child psychologist, made the point to me that probably the most impactful thing I would ever do as a parent would be to demonstrate how one behaves when faces adversity. And so I got up every day and I got dressed, and my job was figuring out what I was going to do next. And it took me 15 months. It's probably, and as I've told in many of your classes at Braze, it's probably the thing I'm proudest of in my life in terms of what I've achieved is facing that moment and being persistent enough to overcome it.
Neil, just to follow on that's I think a great response. What motivates you and keep going? I mean, this is long, from failure and then rising. Is there a specific recipe that, or what motivates you to move forward?
I don't play golf. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think my life, my self-image, my view of me is to be a trustworthy, impactful person in the world. And so I have to find ways to fulfill that perception of myself. And so I'm always looking for, okay, what else can I do? How do I use my brain? How can I do something that advances something? And I've done it in nonprofit areas. I've done it in a lot of different professional areas. But that's what motivates me is my need to feel meaningful.
Thank you. Thank you. Joanne, you have the second question?
Yes, that's for Shirley. So you transitioned from a career in for-profit business and marketing to a non-for-profit career. So that's often referred to as a bridger. But can you explain to us what were the challenges and opportunities that you faced in the middle and in your work in non-for-profit?
Absolutely. I think being a bridger, meaning that you've bridged from a for-profit business world into the nonprofit, it is a huge adjustment, because in the nonprofit world, oftentimes there are less resources. There is a focus on governance and accountability to your board of directors that is not profit driven, but mission driven. The primary focus is the good that you're doing and the service that you're providing to those that you serve. And so recognizing that you bring certain skills from business to nonprofit, but also understanding that the nonprofit world, while still a business, because I've always approached it that way, it is still a business with a business plan and a strategic plan. There are best practices and there are managerial processes that I needed to learn. And that is why I went back for my master's in public administration. Not because I had the intention of starting a nonprofit organization, but because I intended to try to obtain an executive director role at another nonprofit. I had been working for a number of smaller nonprofit organizations and felt that I really loved this industry and that this is what I wanted to do. And so there was I knew that I needed to have continuous learning to learn what those best practices were. On the plus side, the opportunities was that I was I was able to translate my business skills and my business managerial approaches to the nonprofit world. So that actually gave me a leg up on some of the individuals that were in this industry that did not have that same background. I think it's an asset when you can blend both. as long as your focus as a nonprofit leader is to focus on your mission.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Michael, first, congratulations on the book. Part of the book is you did this study with I think approximately with over 40 people. What were some of the lessons learned from these individuals who are entering their second careers?
Yeah, thank you. These were actually interviews with 40 individuals who made a complete change in their life, a 180-degree turn. It was either in their career or it was in their personal life or in their lifestyle. And, you know, coming from the magazine business, I think storytelling of individual people's stories is always the best way to illustrate these kinds of things. And I think that some of the learnings that came out of those interviews, and by the way, we did a subsequent quantitative study as well that included 620 responses from people from around the US from all different backgrounds. But the thing that I can share is that when people are thinking about a change, it takes time. It takes a year plus to really think through what it is you want to change and how you want to make a move. I thought Shirley's personal story is a very good example of that. But I also learned that, you know, if you're 40 or 50 or 60 today and you're healthy, you are going to potentially live to be 90. And so you're going to have the opportunity to have multiple careers, lifelong learning, potentially multiple partners. You know, you're going to have a very long life. And if you are 25 today and you are 30 today, you have a very good shot of living to 100 years old. So you're going to have a 100-year life. And what are you going to do with that life? You know, you're not going to be doing just one thing for 70 years. So you have the ability to break it down. And that is a great, at midpoint, at midlife, a phenomenal opportunity to start over again after perhaps maybe your first 35-year career, whether it's going back to school or moving into the nonprofit sector or doing what Neil Braun is doing now in a startup. You know, what the Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City identifies that 26% of all entrepreneurials are people now 55 through 64. And so there's a lot of entrepreneurial activity happening with people of all ages. But, you know, you have an opportunity. And so these 40 individuals all did these kinds of things. I'll give you one quick example. A fellow named Randy Boyd, who founded a business in Tennessee. He ultimately worked with the governor on a governor's commission. He was a businessman with a bachelor's degree. And he worked with the governor to create something called the Tennessee Promise, which was guaranteeing any student in Tennessee, any person in Tennessee, free community college or trade school education. And it is available to people of all ages. So if you're 50 years old and you want to become a carpenter, you could go back to school free as part of the Tennessee Promise. To make a long story short, Randy is now the president of the University of Tennessee, which is an enormous institution. He only has a bachelor's degree. He is paid $1 a year. He is trying to bring the Tennessee Promise to the whole institution for a 4-year college degree. And, you know, he stepped into this career at 60. So he is now the president of this university, first time ever in a higher education institution. And, you know, he's got a 5-year deal right now. So who knows where this will take him. But that's an incredible story of someone who really did a big midlife pivot.
So a great response, Michael. I just have a follow-up. You mentioned living to 100 years. I mean, that's a fascinating statement to continue reach that 100. But the reality is that the Federal Age Discrimination Act states 40 years. So you have this federal, like 40 years.
Right.
There is discrimination, this idea of ageism. How do you manage that? How do you fight that as if one wants to enter the second career?
Yeah.
When the number is 40 right now?
Yeah, it's a great point. And we could do a whole session on ageism and what is happening in the culture. I think that we're on the cusp, I would argue, in all the research I've done, of a significant movement and revolution that is going to change government policy, corporate policies, institutional policy, because as you mentioned at the top of the program, there is an enormous amount of experience and wisdom with the boomer generation. And this is a generation that wants to stay engaged and involved, and employers need to tap into that. Some of this will be policy. It's shocking to hear and to learn that PwC did a study and only 8% of American corporations include age as part of their DEI policy. And that has to change, as does many other things that are happening. And so a part of this is, rooting out and routing out ageism that is culturally inherent, and also taking it on as an individual with regards to individualism. There is a great story in the book of a woman who is 53. She was a book editor. She decided she wanted to go to medical school, and she felt this exact thing. She could not get into an American medical school because of her age. And at 53, she said, I can be a doctor for 30 years, but that inherent ageism, she ended up going to school in the Caribbean. She's now 63 and she's a doctor. But I think this is going to become a significant movement that's going to be led by a lot of people who are going to change the script and change the construct of 50 plus in lots of different ways. It's happening already. And I think you're going to see this happen. And the next generation, the Gen X and Gen Y and millennials, they're going to be living during this period in a significant way. There will be 5.3 million 100-year-olds in the year 2100. And so all of this is going to change as we go through the pipeline.
So Neil and Shirley, just wanted to build on that. The studies have shown, in order to get this movement started, Michael's talking about the perception people have about individuals over 50 needs to change. So in your experience, how can organizations, and even at the government level, what can we do to change the perception people have so that it's positive, it's more accepting, more inclusive? Neil, jump in.
Well, so in my startup, I have 3 partners and I'm the youngest. They're all in their late 70s. So there are venture capitalists we've been in front of who, it became clear to us very early, we're not most people's vision of a startup entrepreneur. And so we started addressing it, ourselves, and selling our difference. I mean, what we do bring to the table is unrivaled experience, expertise, contacts, and so that's what we sell about ourselves. And we've identified a few people more in their 40s who we've identified as people who we think can succeed us in time. So I think rather than try and be something we're not, we're trying to own what we are. And that is highly experienced, highly successful, highly connected people who can open a lot of doors, frame a lot of opportunities, and we can be the sounding boards and mentors to a younger operating management. And so that's how we've at least gone about it.
Yeah, I also want to contribute to that conversation, in that 50, 60 is no longer our parents or our grandparents, 50 and 60 or 70-year-old. We are in a period of time where there's greater focus on our health, our lifestyle, our intellectual stimulation, access to information. And as a woman, so many of my peers and friends who postponed having children till later in life, have a strong career from the first half of their lives, maybe took some time to have balance and raise a family, and now their children are grown and they want to do something else. And that may be jumping back into another college degree, going back to college, or that may be starting another career path. But we have so much continuous learning to do and so much to offer and so much talent that is being underutilized if we don't tap into that.
Yeah, Brace, can I jump in here and
Sure,
just
sure.
add something? I think Shirley touched on something. It is the redefinition. And one of the things that I hate is when someone says 60 is the new 40. What I say is 60 is the new 60 and 70 is the new 70. And let's put the role models in front of the culture who are leading that pack to be proud of what a 70 or 60 looks like. And if we think of language and the ageist language we have in the culture, everything from, midlife crisis to age appropriate to the toxic word of retire instead of rewire, there's so much that is there that we just have to take out of our language, because all of these people that Shirley is alluding to are those people who are I call them the reimagineers. They're the ones who are making what 60 today will look like and 70, and they're the ones who will be starting new businesses and entering new careers. And, a friend of mine, I think Neil knows him, who is named Alan Weber, who was a magazine publisher at 69, was elected to be the mayor of Santa Fe, New Mexico, as an example. I mean, think about our current president, who was 78 years old, or Nancy Pelosi, who was 80 years old, or Dr. Fauci, who was 80 years old. I mean, we don't even look at them and think about it in the context of age. We look at them and think about it in the context of their contributions and what they're doing. And that is the big difference here. So I think this is going to be led by example from people like Neil, for example, and Shirley, who are doing what they're doing.
Good. So let's just follow up. I can't figure out who's in the Zoom room right now, but I think most of the participants or the audience right now are people who are even struggling to start the first career. So you mentioned this idea of health. So what advice would you give to people who are starting their first careers? What can they do now so they're prepared for the second career? For example, the people I've spoken to in the second career, there are a lot of regrets. I wish I had done that. I wish I had done this. And so from all three of you, if you were to give the best practices to people who are in their first careers, hey, do this so you're ready for the second career, what would that be?
I'll start. What I used to say to my students all the time when I was dean was, no matter what's happening in the economy, there's always a market for excellence. So I think whatever you do first, do it to the best of your ability and demonstrate you are capable of achieving excellence. Because my experience is that people will give you a chance to do something else if you've been excellent at something and you've proven to be the kind of person who makes things happen, gets things done, meets goals. I think second careers are based more on who you are than the vertical you've been in. And so use your first career to have a very good story about who you are.
Thank you. Shirley, Michael?
Yeah, I think also that in your first career, you take that time to develop the skill sets, the talents, the foundation of your professionalism that you will carry with you no matter what the next phase of your life or the next career path brings. Everything is a learning opportunity and an opportunity for growth. I also believe that throughout our lives, it's important, as Neil had said, to have a defined goal for yourself as to what your purpose and your mission is. Keep an eye out, keep your heart and your mind open to what it is that you are passionate about, so that as you explore other options, you can keep guiding yourself toward in that direction.
I'll jump in and just make the comment. It's going to be, I'm going to come at it a little different way, because oftentimes second careers are born out of a frustration of a first career because someone has abandoned what they really wanted to do in their life. We all know the stories of the person who wanted to be an anthropologist but was talked into being a dentist by their parents or their spouse, and they're both very fine professions, but person's passion was to be an anthropologist. And so what I say is, for your first career, what is really critical is to do something that you love and that you're passionate about. When I came to New York as a young guy with no money and no contacts and had the desire to be in the publishing business is not known for paying a lot of money. So I wanted to chase my passion, and fortunately it led to, great success and financial success as well. But I think oftentimes with second careers, people take the pause and they say, you know what, I'm now invested 20, 25 years in a first career, and I left myself behind. And, I now need to go and enter the nonprofit sector if you care about social impact, or, become a teacher if you care about, giving back, things that you didn't necessarily do. So I think my message would be, follow your heart as well as your passion in terms of starting your first career, and it will take you to many other places in your second and third careers.
So great answer. So I'm going to push all three of you to one. Do you think this idea of a second career is culture bound, US specific? What would you say to people in other cultures who would say, you know what, I just don't want to work. I'm going to stop at 55 and I'm going to enjoy the rest of 45 years. So is this culture bound, or is this concept universal? Neil?
I think you could probably find lots of people in any culture who feel that way. I don't get it, but I'm sure there's lots of people who feel that way. I don't know. I just want to amplify something Michael just said, though, if I just could deviate for 1 second. You were talking about the power of storytelling. I think no matter what you did in your first career, there's a way to tell that story to launch your second career. One of the things I worked on all the time with students was how to tell their narrative in a way that would be meaningful to the people they were talking to, and how to connect the dots of their past to what they wanted to do, and not to be preoccupied with what industry you're in. It's really about, what did you learn? What are the skills? What did you achieve? Who did you demonstrate you were? So I do think the storytelling piece is really important.
I would just jump in and say, I'm with Neil. I can't imagine someone wanting to just sort of hang out for 45 years. I mean, that is, that's a little bit of a scary proposition to me. Listen, everybody has things and passions in their lives. I always say, go back to your younger self. What was your younger self telling you that you wanted to do? And I don't necessarily just mean in profession. I mean in enjoyment, in hobbies, and did you want to be a musician? You can still be a musician. Did you want to be a photographer? You can still be a photographer. There's always something that can keep you excited and engaged as you move out of your first half of your life. And I think that's universal.
Yeah, and I don't know that so much that people don't want to do anything in the second stage, but rather that they need to find what it is that gets them up in the morning and gets them up and going. And to Michael's point, it could be a hobby, or it could be a desire to have certain experiences like traveling. And for some of us, it's about work or community or giving back in some way. I personally, I'm thinking of starting horseback riding lessons in the next 10 years. So this is something I've always dreamed of doing, but never did. And now maybe I have some time to do it. So it doesn't necessarily, I don't think that this concept of raw is all about work. It's about adding value to your life in your 60s and 70s and 80s, and feeling that you can be welcome to pursue those interests.
So your definition, so it's good to clarify that your definition of a second career is pretty broad. It includes work-life balance, it includes hobbies, it includes pursuing passions. So it's not always just running after work and starting businesses. So it could be anything that excites you and you're passionate about.
Yeah, there's a concept embraced that some of you may have heard. It's called the portfolio life. And it is taking your the second half of your life and allocating multiple things to your life. Some of it might be working several days a week. Some of it might be a passion towards with your nonprofit. Some of it may be that you're going to become a master's in the equestrian field, like Shirley is going to do when she's competing and becoming that world-class masters person. And this is called, putting together a portfolio of all the things that are of interest to you. And, I think that's also because a second career it shouldn't necessarily look, feel, and smell like your first career. It may be, a different kind of career, and obviously it may not have the same longevity, and you're not going to necessarily follow the same path that you took when you were sort of, if you will, climbing the ranks to become a senior executive in business, for example. So it can take on lots of different definitions, the second career.
Excellent. Thank you. That was a great answers. Samantha, would you like to open up to see if any participants have any questions they would like to ask?
Yes, so I'll invite you now if you'd like to unmute yourself. You can ask a question. Also, there were a couple comments in the chat box, not exactly questions, but if anybody wants to expand on their comments from the chat box, I welcome you to do that as well.
Hi.
Hello, my name is Darren Marshall. Can you talk a little bit about economics in your retirement, 55 officially or 60 or whatever? Because that seems to be a very much important issue or topic right now. Are you ready to retire?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think a big subject of that is, and this is very individualized, what is your number and what is your lifestyle that you want to fund? And I think that is many people who are approaching that part of their life don't sit down to do that work to figure out what kind of income do I need to have the kind of lifestyle that I want. And I think that's really critical to do that. And there are lots of things online that you can use, different software packages if you, or your local, or your banker, or if you have an investor, an advisor. So I think that's part one. Part two is, there are going to be, the boomers in general have a very large set of assets. You probably know that over the next 20 years, there will be $61 trillion worth of assets passed on down to the next generation. Not every one of the boomer generation, we have a lot of inequity in our country and in our world. So not everyone is going to have that benefit. And, that leads to the gig economy and part-time work and people being able to work at different places through the gig economy. It also is going to have government policy change. I think you're probably familiar with the current discussions in Washington that, for instance, Medicare should be covering hearing and visual and dentistry. I'm all for that because it's going to take some of the economic burden off of people as they get older and they may be feeling some economic crunch. But I think it gets back to how much cash flow do you need to live the life that you want to live.
You mind if I get those headphones back?
I think this conversation also lends itself to the fact that you can pursue a second career because you do need that income to carry you through those years of quote unquote the retirement years that you don't want to retire, but you want and need to continue to work. Why not make it work that is meaningful to you, but that you can also get paid for?
I think, Jane, do you have
Oh, hi, how are you? So my name's Jane. I actually attended Pace University, and it was a pre-college graduate pivot. I was fascinated by nutrition, and so I ended up getting a 2-year degree and working at a hospital, and it just wasn't sure if I wanted to pursue my master's. So I went to school in London to pursue my passion, which was literature. And I came back home and I attended Pace. And then one of the professors said, you're a good writer. Why don't you go to the newspaper? And he was right. I was obsessed obsessed with magazines growing up. So much so, my mom said, you know all the models' names. Do you know all your presidents' names? And I also wanted to say hi to Michael. You probably do not remember me, but I was an editorial assistant back in the Art Cooper era.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Wonderful.
And I was there many years and have maintained many good friendships from that era. I'm tuning in though also because I had an amazing career, but unfortunately accolades, all the Conde Awards, moved up the ladder from everything from copywriter to my last role was executive creative services director at Travel and Leisure. Before that, I was at Allure. I worked with Nancy Berger for many years, who hired me freelancing when Cookie folded. I've been through this a few times.
We're 1 degree of separation here, Jane.
We are for sure. I would love to talk to you offline, but for the benefit of the group, so since 2017, I've been looking for my next act, and I've had a million resumes. I've had counselors, and in a way, I feel like Michael Corleone. I try to get out of the publishing, but they keep bringing me in. And at this stage of my life, I need to generate income. So wherever the jobs come, I'm writing tons of branded content for everybody, working for a media company. But I've found the challenge is connecting the dots and pivoting. I tried, even grant writing as an amazing person who has done presentations for winning accounts, that would be a natural thing. And I would love to do something to benefit, a cause. I've just found it very difficult to either get into another profession or to even align with what I have now. And that goes down to even the interviewing process is so different from back in the day. You're vetted and screened a million times and take personality tests. So I've put my job search on pause, and I'm just continuing with my current full-time freelance job, and also chronicling my last 4 years of interviews and trying different jobs. I even took a sales job, which I never had before, but I've always supported sales, and I broke many accounts. And, then this other opportunity came back up, and I'm following through. I love to build brands. I love marketing. I love writing. So I'm sticking with that. But if anyone has a suggestion or had that magic moment when they broke through to something else, I'd be thrilled, because I've probably applied to hundreds of jobs over the years.
Jane, I think, first of all, I'm happy to do a little offline with you. We can connect on LinkedIn, so just connect there.
Yes.
Because I think I would just give a quick response that I think that it sounds like you have to make a decision. Do you want to stay in your existing skill set and stay in the world in which you've been in? And as you said, you've diversified into branded content, et cetera, or do you want to do something dramatically different? So I'll give you an example of a woman that I interviewed in the book who was kind of like you, more on the editorial side. And she made the decision that she wanted to become a psychotherapist and went back to school and got a master's degree, and is now works in the opioid crisis in the Southwest. And so I think you have to make the decision. Do you want to sort of break clean and go to an entirely new second career? Or do you want to take the first career that you've built so beautifully and just keep adding building blocks to it and extending to it? I think they're two very separate paths.
Yes.
And so the second path takes obviously more digging and thinking, and what is it that you want to do? And I will say that, for people who want to go back to have education, there is so much funding and so much money available for adults to get funding through Pell Grants and federal grants and foundations and all the above. So there is money out there for that.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Jane. I have a question since we have 10 minutes left for each panelist. If all of you, I'm assuming, are in your second careers. If you had to write a letter to you in your first career early on, what would that letter include? So maybe a 25-year-old you, if you were to, or even a memo advising the 21 or 25-year-old you, what would you say? Michael, why don't you start?
I would send a memo to myself saying, I'm proud of you for making the decision that you made by not taking a route that was going to be promising more, at the time, economic return. Go to law school, become a banker, all those things that I thought about. I studied economics in undergraduate school. I chased my passion. And so I would send the letter to myself and saying, good on you. You followed your heart and you followed your passion in a career.
Thank you. Neil?
I actually find it a difficult question because I'm really happy for the way my life evolved professionally. I could never have predicted it. If I gave my young self the benefit of all these decades of knowledge, I'm not sure I would have taken that path, and I wouldn't end up where I am. What's become meaningful to me, and the reason I think, I've lived my professional life in chapters. I've been married for over 40 years, but I've had 14 different jobs. I think part of it is, for the first 50 years, I was trying to figure out what my passion was. I liked everything I did, but after 3 or 4 years, I was like, okay, I got that. Now what? Just didn't hold my interest. And so I go on to the next thing. And by the way, one of the pieces of advice I give you is, don't abandon, even if you're picking a second career. I differ with you a little, Michael. They are pretty different paths. Do you want to do the same thing, or do you want to start something new, as you were saying to Jane? But I do think that sometimes your difference is your advantage. And that may be one of the lessons I've learned that I would tell myself, is that don't worry about what you're doing. You'll be able to figure out how to make it valuable to people. Because I became president of the NBC television network, having never worked at a television network, but I worked in every other aspect of television. So when I met with the CEO, Bob Wright, I said to him, you've got a building full of people who know more about network television than me, but you don't have anybody who knows more about the entire television industry than me. And by the way, I read the book about some of the decisions you made, and I had a different point of view. You want to hear them? And I basically, and he called me the next day and he said, we've been thinking that it's time to replace the president of the network. Would you want to come interview for that? So how the job wasn't even open. I became dean. I used to tell my students all the time, I'm dean of a business school. I didn't even go to business school. So it really isn't so much about, and my interview was very much the same as my NBC interview. I said, look, you've got lots of people who know more about academia and scheduling and all the things that most academics and deans know, but how many people do you have on campus that have done the things I've done? And think about the value I could bring, the people I know, and the lessons I've learned, and the practical experience I can bring to the educational process. So I would tell myself, do what you're doing.
Thank you. Shirley?
Yeah, I think that Neil touched upon sort of my letter to myself at 25, and that's to recognize that your difference is your strength. It's your superpower. And as a first-gen Latina who came from a challenging financial background, and I grew up in Puerto Rico, and I came here. It was the first of my family to go to college. I think I struggled in my 20s and late 20s and early 30s with this whole sense of the imposter syndrome, and not realizing my own strength, not realizing my own potential. And it wasn't until I embraced all of me, including my cultural identity, and celebrated that as a strength and as a purpose, as what I wanted to do with my career, that I feel I became fully whole and fully complete. So, and I tell my 25-year-old that your dreams are going to come true. I remember I found a list that I made when I was 28, and everything on that list came to fruition, thank God. And I think it was a long journey, but certainly one that I reflect on and share with my own children. And that I hope that they are as motivated and inspired.
Thank you, Shirley. I have one question, one more. I think you raised this point, and we discussed this before also. What advice do you have for people, men and women, who sacrifice careers early on in life to have a family or take care of their parents, or life hits them, they're lost in life, and because listening to you there, it seems that there's a new beginning somewhere. So what advice would you have for these kind of individuals?
I think anytime that you take a pause, whether it's to care for family, raise a family, or if you're ill and you cannot work for certain, it's to continue to learn no matter what you're doing, and to always stay relevant and current. And so I think that no matter what stage of my life I was at, early profession, early career, a consultant, a stay-at-home mom that was also working part-time and then full-time, I was always learning and always looking at options and networking. I think that you should always, for myself, always think of yourself as a professional and build for, and look for growth, look for ways to keep growing and learning, so that then when you're ready to step back in, you've got a network already.
Thank you.
Hey, Brace, I
Michael?
want to add to that, if I may, just,
Sure.
you know, an extraordinary story to Shirley's point. So my background, I'm a poor working class kid. My parents were high school graduates, but we had no college graduates in our family. I'm the first one as well. My mother raised 6 children. My father was a laborer. And my mother, at the age of 46 or 47 years old, who had really never been in the workforce her entire life, started a career at 46 and 47. And what was that career? She became a travel agent. And, you know, she walked into a local travel agency and she said, you know, I'll work for free if you teach me how the reservation systems work, etc., which she did for a few months. She then spent 25 years as a travel agent and traveled all over the world and created a career for herself that is, you know, was phenomenal. And so, you know, I think that she had nothing going for her in terms of education or experience, and there you go. So I think you can do this at any time in your life if you have the innovative thinking and the creativity and the ambition.
Thank you. Neil?
One thing, Brace, that, you know, one of the things, you know, in retrospect, I didn't think about this as a strategy, but in retrospect, thinking about my career, especially the NBC story and coming to pay story, is sometimes the answer to the question maybe you should ask yourself is, where can I add the most value? And the answer often is someplace where there's nobody else like me. And so I sold myself to NBC as something different, and I sold myself to Pace as something different. So if you can tell your personal story about how your unique set of experiences could add value to somebody's situation, maybe like what happened to me at NBC, a job will open up for you because you'll convince somebody that you can add value. That's really why people hire anybody, is because they believe you can add value. And I think, you know, if anybody who's lived decades of experience has value to add some way, and it's about telling that story, I think, that can help you find the next thing.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. I think this has been a wonderful event. So Samantha, I think I understand that the panelists can stay for a few minutes beyond 6 o'clock, by 7. And so we can, should we conclude now or have few minutes more?
We can go for a few more minutes. Absolutely.
Okay. So I would like the panelists now, if they would, one question, if they would like to ask each other. Michael, if you would, what would you like to ask Neil or Shirley, and them to ask each other one question that could help us? Yes, Michael, go ahead.
Sorry, I put myself on mute for a minute there. You know, I think both Shirley and Neil have incredible personal stories, and I think that they sort of exemplify the role models that I talked about earlier. And one of the chapters that is in the book, which is always a question I love to ask anyone, I'll ask both of them: what is your favorite future? What is your favorite future? What does it look like?
Shirley, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Oh, goodness. You go first. Thanks.
Well, you know, for me, it's actually about a feeling. You know, I married a psychologist. What do you want from me? So,
Too funny.
you know, it's really about feeling. I want to feel impactful, trusted, and important to other people until the day I die. And as long as I feel, I can live with everything else.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think my favorite future is one where I can continue on this path that I'm currently on and make an impact and be an advocate. I say that while I have 2 children, I have over 300 children in the scholars that I have helped get to college, who are first-gen Latinx students. And I think that the future for me is one where I can continue to be a voice for equity and educational opportunity, but also to have balance and fulfillment. I want to make a little time for some joy.
Great, great.
Neil, what would you like to ask Shirley and Michael?
You know, one of the things that I found most powerful about my experience as dean at Lubin was that so many of our alumni are first in their family to go to college. So many of today's students are still first in their family to go to college. I grew up in, you know, fairly comfortable circumstances. We didn't worry about money in my house. My parents paid for my whole education. I lived in a very affluent community, so I didn't feel rich because I grew up with people who had a lot more, but I had a very easy life. So I so respect and admire the students and alumni I met at Pace. So the question I would really ask you is, how much do you think coming from little has enabled you to achieve everything you have?
Shirley, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think that for me, my brother and I have had this conversation, what drives us. Our circumstances have always instilled in us the concept that failure was not an option, and that no matter how hard the road got or work or the challenges that we faced, we were determined to never give up, and that we wouldn't let ourselves fail even in the toughest of times, because there was nowhere to go but forward.
I would say that, you know, what are the influences that you had, and or what influences can you play in someone, young person's life? Because my father, who was an enormous influence in that our Friday night family trip was to the local library, and we were allowed to take 5 books out, and I've read those 5 books by Sunday. And I just knew that words and ideas, and ultimately it would be education, was going to take me to a very different place. So it was that influence of a parent and then a subsequent teacher in high school that made me realize that the key to everything was education. And so today, you know, our family, we have PhDs in the family and master's degrees in the family, and the whole family has changed and evolved, but it had to start somewhere. And I think it was the true awareness that without an education, it would be really hard to be successful. And that was my point of view.
So true. The library changed my life as well. I remember going to the library and taking out books, and that's how I actually, you know, learned to read and write English. But it was at our local library, and I say it changed my life. And we say that education is transformational and generational, because once you educate a child, you transform their lives for their future generations as well.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify that the people in the room that when you mention libraries, not the online libraries, the actual physical library.
No physical books.
Just
They used to go
one
and stamp a card.
Yes. or you
Yes,
would go- It's a
the
physical
Dewey
library.
Decimal System.
So do we have, I think if is there any one question that somebody would like to ask before we end this? Samantha in the chat, is there something that to conclude this?
Let's see. We didn't have questions. There was just a lot of really great commentary in the chat. So if anyone would like to expand on anything, or if you do have a question. Oh, Alan.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm hiding from my kids at 44 years old. So the 2 and 5-year-olds. So I worked at home remotely since 2003 at Merrill Lynch. Nothing could prepare me for this. So I apologize for any noise. I just want to simply say really quick, thank you so much. Despite what my wife, the Dream Crusher, says, I'm going to keep following my heart, even though 10 years at Merrill, 3 years drinking in Japan, trying to open a bar and doing real estate now. I feel I can find my way now, and I will continue reading GQ, even though I'm not that kind of guy. Material will never get on.
No, Esquire. You got to go to Esquire now.
I'm going to go
Esquire's-
wherever you tell me to now, Michael. I'm going to follow my heart. If
Thank you.
my heart is at Esquire, I'm going there.
Perfect.
But thank you. This has been amazing. I just want to say a big thank you because I'm in that point in my life for sure. So this was huge for me. Thank you so much.
Go, Alan, go. You can do it.
I think that's a great way to end this on that wonderful note. So Samantha, is it possible that you could copy paste the chat questions and we could send them to the panelists for
The comments? Yes.
yeah,
I-
comments, all comments, and then
That's
I
great.
because I think we had a discussion that we may continue this in the future, so we could have
Yeah.
some discussion and some thought leadership around those comments.
Mhm.
But again, I would like to thank Neil, Michael, and Shirley. Thank you so much. This has been great. I think the students and we all learned, even though we are probably most of us are in our first careers, but I think getting ready for the second part is equally as important, as Alan pointed out. So, and he's ready too. Thank you.
So much.
Yes, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes,
Have a great evening, and we hope to see you again soon.
great.
Thank
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Good night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.